There's a short video about Jared Anderson talking about his psychological makeup. I thought it'd be a pretty interesting video to make. So what gave me sort of the inspiration of making this video was watching a short clip that Top Rank put out about Jared Anderson, and it's featuring Roy Jones, and it basically tells you about Jared's upbringing and just about who he is as a person. I do think Jared Anderson is a individual who was raised in a very good family, and he seems to have a lot of discipline instilled in him. And it also glosses over his amateur career, which is quite extensive, especially for a heavyweight. I mean, some heavyweights start late. You know, you've got people like Anthony Joshua who started boxing at 18, but Jared was one of these heavyweights who actually started boxing from quite an early age. The main part of the clip that interested me was when he was having a conversation with Roy Jones, and he was talking about the pressure and how it's a little bit too much, and he actually breaks down in tears. When I saw this, I actually wasn't too happy from a point of view of Jared Anderson's ability to make it to the top of the heavyweight division. Now, what I'm going to say, some people might find very harsh, and it's honestly not to ridicule Jared Anderson in any way. I do think he's a very good person, and this is nothing where I'm trying to say, you know, men shouldn't cry or anything like that. I'm completely talking about it in the context of athletic performance and what it takes to be a truly great in your given respected field. So when I saw this and Jared was breaking down, I was instantly like, this is not the psychology of a guy who's going to make it to the top of the heavyweight division. It just isn't. To make it to the top of the heavyweight division or any division in boxing, you need to have a belief within yourself, and you cannot be looking externally for any validation of your ability. And when I say of your ability, I'm not just talking about your technical ability, but also your ability to deal with stressful situations, because there are going to be a lot of stressful situations. Now, there are a lot of other fighters who cry, and the reason I don't read into it too much is the reason you're crying. You know, sometimes a fighter will cry, say, because they're grieving the loss of a loved one, and that's completely fine. And you know, I don't read anything into that. That's a perfectly normal reason to be crying, right? But when you're crying about the pressure and how hard it is, then I look at that as a weakness. And I think a lot of Jared Anderson's rivals probably watched that video and were licking their lips saying he's got a mental breaking point. The other thing that also interested me was an article that I read where Jared Anderson said he's not necessarily interested in becoming world champion. As long as he can make a lot of money, he doesn't really care if he retires from boxing young and doesn't win a championship. And you know, that was another sign for me that this is not the mental makeup of an individual who's going to make it to the absolute top in the boxing world, and definitely not have the longevity at the top. Because if you're struggling with the pressure now, when you haven't really had any tough fights, imagine when you do get to that point, you know, when the public are expecting so much from you. And you got to remember, Jared Anderson isn't like Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's had a heck of a lot more pressure put on him than Jared Anderson has. You know, so if you're struggling with the pressure now, imagine when you do get into those championship fights, you know, and there's all of the press coverage and the fight week and the media workout and your opponent goading you. What's Jared Anderson going to be like then? You know, I do think Jared is a tremendous athlete. You know, the way he puts his punches together at heavyweight is nothing short of spectacular. He's got very good dexterity, very good athletic ability, and he's got a good engine, Jared Anderson, and he can obviously whack a bit. I do think he has technical flaws, but there have been great fighters who, in spite of their technical flaws, have made it to the top of boxing, you know. So, and that's why they say boxing is 90% mental and 10% physical. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the exact number to put on it, but the point is that a large part of boxing is the mental side. So yeah, I think Jared does have a leaky defense. So even from a technical perspective, I do think there's flaws in Jared Anderson, and it's just going to be interesting to see how his career plays out. I mean, I wish him well. I want to see all these young fighters do well. But when I saw this video, it did make me question whether Jared Anderson is going to be that guy, because you got to remember there were a lot of articles and talks about Jared Anderson being the next great American heavyweight, and I emphasize the word great because if we're just talking about a good fighter, a fighter who's going to be in and around the top 10 and he's going to win some fights and lose some fights, he's never going to be, you know, the dominant guy in the division. Yeah, I can see Jared Anderson doing that. I can definitely see Jared Anderson winning a few fights against some good heavyweights. So when I'm talking about Jared Anderson in this video, it's got to be taken from the perspective of him being the top dog, right? You've got to ask yourself, could you imagine Canelo Alvarez crying over the pressure of boxing? Could you imagine Terence Crawford crying over the pressure of boxing? I'm not saying those guys don't cry, but they're definitely not crying about how difficult it is and, you know, the pressure and all of that sort of stuff. You know, especially early in a fighter's career, when they're talking about retirement and not winning world titles, it's a real red flag, because later on in the fighter's career, when he's achieved it all and he's been through the mill and he's, you know, gone through all of the dark side of boxing, you know, where he's been trashed by the fans, I don't mind if a fighter then kind of gets jaded and he's like, you know what, I'm just in it for the money. After he's won all the world titles and he's done it all. But when you're doing it early in your career, it's a real red flag, because you haven't even been through the mill yet and you're already talking like this. You know, the pressure's already getting to you. You know, I don't mind it when a fighter does it later in his career. Say he's won the world title. Say Canelo right now, you know, he's won multiple world titles. He's been on the pound for pound #1 list. If he now took that attitude, and I'm not saying Canelo has this attitude now, but if he did, I could understand it, because he's been through the mill. He's been through all of the pressure. He's getting a bit older in life. He's probably thinking more about financial stability. But you know, when you're a young, red-blooded male, you know, who's has been talked about being great, then I kind of wouldn't expect that, you know. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this video with Jared Anderson. I thought I'd just put it out there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time.